MDMA is one of the only substances on the planet that is known to enhance empathy. But for the last 112 years since it was first discovered, scientists have been unable to figure out exactly why or what it's doing in the brain. That is, until last year, when a new article came out in Science Advances published by researchers at Stanford University. This article explained much more about how MDMA was working in the brain, and specifically how it was enhancing empathy. The good news is, I was the first author on that study. I led it myself, and in this video, I'm going to break down exactly what we found, what it means for humanity, for neurobiology, and for you. People tend to think of MDMA as a psychedelic drug, but in fact, it's classified as an empathogen because of its ability to enhance empathy. MDMA was first created in 1912, not by a drug dealer in a van like you might imagine, but rather by Merck Pharmaceuticals. Merck was actually looking for new drugs that might help control bleeding, and so they synthesized MDMA, but they never actually tested it on humans. So for like 60 years, nobody had any idea that MDMA had these incredibly powerful effects. In the 1970s, the research picked back up on MDMA, and that's when it was discovered that it really brings people together. Therapists found that people on MDMA could address conflicts with family members and romantic partners much more easily. It was somehow making them more empathic. Now, in the modern world, people have continued to discover this empathogenic quality of MDMA, but mostly in nightclubs and raves. However, we still don't understand how the drug does this. What systems in the brain does a drug need to tickle to make people feel more empathic? How does the brain create and feel empathy? It's time for some answers. So let's dive in. Okay, first we need to address a very central question. What is empathy? Down the road, I'll definitely make a whole video about empathy, but for now, the short answer is empathy is when you feel someone else's emotions. It's when you take on the emotional state that's more appropriate to someone else's situation than your own. For example, have you ever seen someone you love crying, like a parent or sibling, and you start to tear up yourself? That is empathy. But it's also when you see someone smiling and you start to feel this contagious sense of brightness and joy. That's empathy too. Now, what I'm describing is emotional empathy. It's when you take on other people's emotions. There's also cognitive empathy, which is when you understand others' emotions, but for this video, we're going to focus mostly on emotional empathy. Now, empathy is a great strength. It helps us understand each other and work together more effectively. It's critical for humanity to survive and thrive. So it's therefore very valuable for us to understand how MDMA enhances empathy. I mean, just imagine if we could harness that. And this is where neuroscience comes in. So on to my study. You may find this shocking, but we actually did this study in mice. And yes, that means we have a way to measure empathy in mice. And also, yes, mice do experience empathy. Here's how we do it. Before I go on, please subscribe for more neuroscience content. I've been on Instagram and TikTok for years, and I'm really trying to get this channel off the ground so I can do more detailed, nuanced, long-form videos like this. So I would greatly appreciate a follow. A few years ago, a professor named Dr. Monique Smith, who now runs her own lab at UC San Diego, discovered this thing called the social transfer of pain in mice. Picture this. You have a healthy, normal mouse who spends 1 hour interacting with another mouse that's experiencing sort of like an inflammation and swelling in one of its paws. It's like arthritis. Now, after that interaction, your healthy, normal mouse will start to behave as if it's also in pain. It becomes very sensitive. For instance, if you gently poke its paw, it will react very intensely as if it's really sensitive. By definition, this is empathy, because the healthy mouse is taking on the sensitivity of the other mouse. And by the way, yes, humans experience this too. It's called empathy for pain. If you've ever watched someone suffer a broken bone or a big cut, and you feel that sense of like, oh, get me away from this. Research has shown that you as the observer in that scenario actually show a pattern of brain activity that's reminiscent of you being in pain yourself. Again, empathy is when we step into the states of others. Dr. Monique Smith found that the mice were seemingly showing this too, and actually, she even found that the mice were showing activity in brain areas that are involved in empathy. Now, this is where MDMA comes in. Dr. Monique Smith and I wondered, if we give that healthy mouse MDMA, will the mouse become more empathic and more sensitive? Amazingly, it did. When we gave that healthy mouse MDMA, they showed extreme sensitivity in their paws after interacting with the arthritis mouse for just 10 minutes. It didn't take a whole hour. However, when we had a sober mouse interact with that arthritis mouse for just 10 minutes, they barely showed any sensitivity. MDMA was clearly enhancing their empathy. This is great news because it means we can use this behavioral setup to study what MDMA is doing in the brain to make the mice more empathic. We suspected that a brain area called the nucleus accumbens might be involved. The nucleus accumbens is deeply involved in motivation and social behaviors. Dr. Monique Smith had previously found that it was involved in this social transfer of pain, so we thought maybe MDMA was simply turning up the dial on this brain area. And indeed, we did find this. When a healthy mouse interacted with another mouse that was in pain, they showed increased activity in the nucleus accumbens if they were on MDMA. So we wondered, what would happen if we just infused MDMA directly into that brain area? Instead of infusing it into the entire brain and body, what if we just sent it to the nucleus accumbens? Would the mice still become more empathic? Amazingly, yes, this is possible. We used a little cannula with a pump to infuse the drug directly into the nucleus accumbens. I did those experiments myself, and let me tell you, they were some of the hardest I've ever done. But luckily, we got the result we expected. When MDMA only went into to the nucleus accumbens, the mice became super empathic and their paws became very sensitive. Now you might be wondering, what if the MDMA itself just makes them more sensitive? Don't worry, we tested that and it wasn't the case. Also, we did sort of the opposite experiment. We gave MDMA to the mouse that was in pain and then had them interact with a mouse that was high on morphine. So that mouse was experiencing pain relief. Because we wanted to ask, would the mouse on MDMA take on the experience and start to show pain relief themselves? And believe it or not, they did. Which is not only super interesting and wild, but it suggests that MDMA can enhance empathy for both negative and positive experiences. And it also kind of reassures us that we're actually looking at empathy, because MDMA enhanced that too. So finally, we had narrowed it down to the nucleus accumbens, but what was MDMA doing there? Well, MDMA is known to act on 3 neurotransmitters in the brain: dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. We suspected that serotonin might be the key because some previous studies had shown that serotonin was involved in social behavior, specifically in the nucleus accumbens. So we used a technique called optogenetics to stimulate the serotonin release just in the nucleus accumbens, and amazingly, it worked. The mice became super empathic. And with that result, we had effectively narrowed down the effects of MDMA on empathy to one neurotransmitter, serotonin, in one brain area, the nucleus accumbens. So while MDMA was doing tons of things across the brain and body, this one signal seemed to be critical for its effect on empathy. So let's step back and ask, what does this mean? Well, first off, we need to validate this result in humans before anything else. That's the nice thing about mouse studies. They allow us to get a really good idea of what might be happening so that we can do fewer tests on humans, save money, save people time, and get right to the point. But let's assume that it does translate to humans. Then what? Well, in that case, that means we may have identified a brain system that could potentially be targeted to enhance empathy. We could develop a drug that just targets serotonin in the nucleus accumbens without doing all the other stuff that MDMA does to specifically enhance empathy and nothing else. That way you don't get all those other effects of MDMA, like the stimulant effects that could be more dangerous and probably not wanted in many cases. A drug like this could theoretically be used to enhance empathy in people who are deficient in empathy. So my question to you is, as a society, as a human race, should we develop a drug like this? And if so, how would we use it? It's a very difficult question, and I'm curious what you have to say. I personally think it could be very helpful. As I said, empathy is a strength. I think it makes us more effective as a species, but I will look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments. This project was such a long journey with so many failed experiments, so much troubleshooting, and literally so much blood, sweat, and tears. So it is a huge pleasure to be able to share it with you. I appreciate your interest, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.